It is Sunday, the 12th of the 10th, 2025. The time is 23 minutes past 8. That means, as always, one thing, that there are a multitude of F1 centric threads at which we need to put. It's going to get techier than techie things. Oh, the humanity indeed. John KTMM, techier than techie things. As always, in the weird and wacky world that is the F that wonks. We will talk about F1 as a community, because I'm getting sick and tired in the first instance of this level of intellectual snobbery, this gatekeeping stuff that always ensues when there's a salacious, no juicy plot. I cannot cope with it. I've been on the Twitters, as I shouldn't be. I should know better. Calling me naive, I get it. Have no sympathy for me, but I've been on the Twitters and I keep seeing these F1 fans, these old grizzled F1 vets, do one of these incestuous relationship, parasocial even, with the weird and wacky world that is the one that is. What are we doing, chat? And again, of course, I'm talking about Zach Brown and Alex Palou. We were on the Twitters last week and we went deep, did ourselves a bit of due diligence and some research. Do you know what I mean? As a very noddy accountant that I am, I know a little bit about governing bodies and chairs and CEOs and companies. I understand what that looks like. I get what conflicts of interest are. So nobody on Twitter or anywhere else is going to tell me that I don't know what I'm talking about, as you wouldn't expect me to tell them. Now, of course, it was Zach Brown, CEO, some say, definitely director of Quadrant, as at July 2025. That's when he handed in his resignation. Why? Because Quadrant were bought out by Veloce. Zach Brown maybe never. We're speculating why he handed his resignation, but those two things happening at the same time can't have been a coincidence. Here's what else is important. And Twitter space went mad last week. Of course, it's under the aegis of Zach Brown and potential favouritism at the altar of Lando Norris, the guy with whom McLaren's commercial value does one of these. Imagine a world for a second where Lando Norris wins the world championship, Mr. British Vogue, Mr. Cheeky Chappy English gentleman settings, Mr. Quadrant, Mr. Esport. He ticks all of the commercial boxes. A marketeer's dream is Lando Norris. He's good looking, again, to utilise the old axiom. Men want to be him, women want to be with him. That's who Lando Norris will. Go ipso facto. He's marketable in a way that Oscar Piastri, notwithstanding how brilliant he is in the car, probably could never be. We tweeted it. And then there were certain bots that decided that they were going to get very incestuous with their facts and quote, pi is 3.141 and you must round down, Cameron, because blah, 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 blah. And I've had enough, chat. I can't do it. The story is this. Don't grice his razor me. The story is this. Zach Brown is in court with Alex Palou, claiming loss of earnings to the tune of 20.7 million US dollars. Full stop. New paragraph. I don't want to hear about the minutiae about Zach Brown wasn't a director. He was not even CEO, and he was only appointed director of one of. Miss me with the 3 decimal place. See, nobody cares about that level of stuff. Give me the upshots. This is what I'm telling you, chat. I don't want to go scorched earth. It's Sunday. I want to be driving Miss Daisy at this point. Do you know what I mean? Smooth sailing as I go to bed. But bloody Nora, the level of intellectual perceived, by the way, intellectual snobbery in the F1 community does me in, and I'm allergic to it. Some of the bloody tweets. Oh, I don't know. A fiduciary malfeasance doesn't necessarily constitute that in this particular occasion. What do you need to consider? Go away, leave me alone. I've been on the board. I understand what fiduciary malfeasance. I've got letters after my name that attest to this. There is a professional code of conduct as far as accountancy is concerned. I get it. I understand it. So stop talking then, these F1 muggles with this bloody intellectual snobbery and god tier levels of gatekeeping. Stop talking to the F1 community like they didn't go to school. It's unacceptable. Miami, you know why it gets techier than techie things? Because this is the very thing that has me doing one of these, retracting, like almost allergic to Formula One. It's always been a sport that has wanted to do us over here and you over there. Yeah, okay, come over here temporarily over the course of a race weekend and give us your tens of thousands of dollars if you're going to go to Las Vegas Grand Prix as an example. Give us your tens of thousands of pounds if you're going to buy VIP paddock passes. Welcome in, therefore. After that, though, why don't you guys get over there, climb back over the other side of the fence? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is not good enough. It is the Drive to Survive generate. Of course it is. Drive to Survive era and footballification of Formula One. And with that, I get comes downside. There are a gazillion new people in F1 from all demographics, all walks of life, men and women now. And that means something different, right? Not everybody's going to know all of the bloody articles in the Sporting Code of Conduct. Not everybody's going to know, like Jacques Villeneuve and Michael Schumacher, what their bloody lap was, the time of their lap was in Jerez 1997. Not everybody's got to remember Suzuka, Senna and Prost. But does that mean that they can't be Formula One fans? You bet your bottom dollar it does not. Of course they're Formula One fans. It just means that they've had a different route into the sport than you and I and we. Unbelievable. Oh, why you know? You have to realise that the counterpoint to that is that Zach Brown wasn't actually a director, he was a CEO, and he was only there until July of 2025, and he was there as one of 4 directors in conjunction with blah, 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 blah. Miss me with that. Who cares about the nonsense? The point is this: mens rea, if that's what we're talking about as far as Zach Brown and Lando Norris, it absolutely exists. Actus rea, well then that's another conversation that we can have. We can moot that back and forth on another day. But actus rea, flipping Nora, what are we talking about? I don't know, the F1 community gets on my nerves sometimes. Forgive me, chat, for going scorched earth so early into the stream. But we're reading some of these. Oh, no, your comma and your full stops are in the wrong there. Oh, you have to read. What are you talking about? This level of intellectual snobbery. You know what? I tell you what. So this is, in my humble opinion, going through uni and doing my accounting exams, the brightest minds come with humility as standard. Mileage may vary. There are difference in extents and not kinds. But the greatest minds, my most brilliant of lecturers, were humble. They didn't feel the need to impose their intelligence on you, because in their brilliant mind, they realised that relatively they knew nothing. And when I go on Twitter and these bods are talking about Formula One and 3.14 pi Fermat's last theorem, what do you need to understand is that there can be no possible conflict of interest. Nobody's talking about conflict of interest. Nobody's talking about conflicts of interest. The conversation that we're having here is under the aegis of favouritism. And how can you not, especially when you recall Australia, hold station, Oscar Piastri, British Grand Prix, we're not going to interject in that, even though everybody said Oscar Piastri's penalty was egregious. Singapore Grand Prix, are you going to invert? No, we'll investigate it after the... It's honestly, how you cannot have this conversation is ridiculous. And people on Twitter want to get wrapped up in 3 decimal place things. Nonsense that absolutely does not matter. Brian, I've had enough, mate. The F1 community, I love it, but I hate it at the same time. So nonsensical. There's brilliant stories over here, and let me tell you why this got techie. There's brilliant stories over here, but old media doesn't even see it. We're out here talking about it when no one else is saviour. Yeah, no. It used to be CMA, SEMA back in the day, saviour, but it's changed now. CGMA, I think it is. But bloody Nora, I don't know. Let's concentrate on the pertinent narratives and plot lines and not get lost in the minutiae. F1 community is so bloody nerds and no, the salient point here is that Brown was the blah 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 blah. I just can't. I need. How about per Bruce Lee? You don't concentrate on the finger or you will miss all the heavenly glory. Everyone's been doing this for a long time though, John Z. It has been doing this for a long time. It's been focusing on the finger and missing all the heavenly glory. Nobody was out here talking about Zach Brown last week until we did it on Twitter. Nobody was talking about, other than Motorsport Magazine, bless them, but nobody was talking about it in a way that was comprehensive and robust, except for Motorsport Magazine, about Alex Palou, $20 million, Zach Brown disappearing WhatsApp. Nobody was on it. Nobody wanted to talk about that because everybody's too busy concerned about, where if the inflection point of the DRS is 86 millimeters and surely the regulatory block won't quite fit through. And what do you need to consider? That's an infringement? No, you're no longer compliant within the rules and the regulations as stipulated per the Concord Agreement in 1981. Just go away. Go away. Drive to Survive has taken your lunch money, and the community needs to adopt accordingly. Safak, it's chaos. Honestly, I just can't, what are we doing? Talk to the proper things. What's going on? It's Zach Brown and it's McLaren and it's Alex Palou. Talk to that. Talk to the way that they're trying to overcompensate as far as the perceived favouritism. Talk to the way that Zach Brown's now looking at Oscar Piastri. Talk to what's going to happen between now and the remaining 6 races. Talk to these proper things that people care about. Old media are sat out here doing this, and no, what do you need to do? What you've got to understand is that the subordinate clause has to be treated in a way that's independent from the... Who cares, F1? You are burning yourself a demographic who are desperate for you to take their money. Honestly, I can't. But F1 does this sometimes. It does have this weird and wacky way of sabotaging itself, doesn't it? Sometimes Formula One can do that, failing to see the F1 wood for the F1 trees. Oh, and by the way, if we're talking about F1 wood and F1 trees, I've got to talk about Bathurst Day, because there's your winner. Overnight, it happened UK time. Of course, it was pain and tender. Techie, apparently. I went back and watched the highlights and it looked like an incredible race. Normally, I understand that race takes place in dry conditions. It was not to dry. It was crash galore. It was destruction derby. And ultimately, these two legends come out on top. But there was another clip that I've got to show you, because it summarises everything about Bathurst infinitely more than I ever could with words, and signifies. Roll the clip.
Greet him, and he can relax for the afternoon, but not in the way that he wants. He's come into this event today 5th in the championship. However, he's already got a locked position into our championship.
There's Robbo.
Yes, Robbo.
And how long? Let's have a bet. How long? I'm saying. Oh, my bet was how long before he gets a beer. How long was that? I would have had a lot of it. That was Winks odds to get on that one then.
Standing ovation for Chaz Mostert drinking a beer at Bathurst.
Yeah, great effort. There's Murph laughing with Fabian. We all knew what was going to unfold. It just took about 5 metres earlier than I thought.
Greet him.
Remember we were talking about humility a couple of seconds ago. That's everything in humility epitomised that Formula One doesn't have. We're kind of too big and too monetised and too, what's the word that I'm looking for? Too pious in our pole sitting setting. It's annoying seeing that Bathurst, that humility. It just wants a bit, like the access that they have to the drivers. There is a certain groundedness, a salt of the earth type thing going on there that we lack and miss in Formula One, because we've gone too big and become too self-aggrandizing. It's important that. It is important. Makes me want to go and become a Bathurst fan. That go and watch it every year like everybody else seemingly does. Oh, and by the way, Bernie Ecclestone has come out and he's had some things to say, hasn't he? I just wanted to show you this. I spotted this on Twitter and I thought it was pertinent. This happened in 2020 per Daniel Vellante, legend on Twitter of all things F1 metrics, data guy, god tier level. Here's what Daniel Vellante posted. This happened in 2020. The AWS went away and mocked up some models with a view to find the fastest driver in F1 history over the course of one lap. In their humble opinion then, Ayrton Senna was it in first. Second was Michael Schumacher. Third, Sir Lewis, Carl Davidson, Hamilton. And in fourth was Maximilian Verstappen. And again, for the avoidance of that, we're not talking about the best driver necessarily. We're talking about the quickest in terms of absolute speed over the course of one lap. Then in 2020, per their data and models, and of course, models will never be completely... Yeah, they will always be fallible. You'll always be able to pick a hole in a cheeky model. You can never do it perfectly. But then in 2020, they said Maximilian Verstappen was fourth in 2020 before he'd even won one championship. Michael, it's the 12th for the day. You're a legend. So go on then. If Max Verstappen was fourth then, where do you think he is now? And again, this predates 2021, 22, 23 and 24. So add into that the most recent evidence. And where do you put Max Verstappen now? Here's what Bernie Ecclestone said, and this is important because the context is this. For the longest time, Max had a gazillion naysayers, but all of a sudden they're shrinking in number now at the altar of the most recent evidence of 2025 that Max Verstappen is laying the smackdown, has been laying the smackdown in real time on all and sundry who wanted to disagree with Max Verstappen's greatness. Now, is he the greatest? Well, we can have that conversation. This feels like F1 barbershop talk. Must you put him on the Mount Rushmore of F1 now? On the back of 2021, on the back of Brazil 24, on the back of the Brazil Grand Prix 2016, you bet your bottom dollar you must. Of course, if you didn't want to, then you may as well just self-declare as an F1 abbot of unreason, one who disbelieves the evidence of their own eyes and ears. So imagine now you've got a Max Verstappen 2025 doing the things that we've seen him do. I've always said about Max, listen, you give him a quick car, he's always going to run down the road, but you don't see the genius then. That's like George at Singapore, W16, fast car, got it working all of a sudden. Of course, you will expect George to do what George does and optimize for his performance. He doesn't miss opportunities even, for he's a thinking shooter. When you'll see Max, however, again, contrary to what the naysayers will say, well, he's a fast car merchant. I want to see how Max fares when he hasn't got a fast car. Have you been watching Formula One for the past 24 months? As near as makes no difference. He has not had a fast car, and yet and still he's won one championship. Fast forward through to 2025. Those McLarens, the double brake ducted MCL 39, God tier cars. Anybody can jump in them and drive them. Do you know what I mean? The pace is there. It's accessible down the road each and every single time. Lando looks like he looks like Jim Clark on occasion when he's had his Weetabix. So too with Oscar Piastri out here doing Fangio things because the car has been so bloody quick. I've always said, therefore, around Max Verstappen, I didn't really want to see Max. I wanted to see Max win as a fan of Mr. Verstappen, foursome, so he seemed to be 5-time champion. But where you're going to see the best out of the Dutchman is when he doesn't have a car and when he's forced to be the difference. You know, when you see a caged animal, when you put its back up against the wall and then all of a sudden it does something incredible, like Neo in The Matrix when confronted with Agent X or Agent Smith at the end, just does some amazing things, and he's beginning to believe. That's where Max is now in 2025. He might not win the championship, but when all's said and done about 2025, I think this might go down as Max Verstappen sans, except for 2021. I think this might go down as Max's best showing. He's been the difference, ladies and gentlemen of the F1 jury. Principal suppositions amongst them: Suzuka qualifying and the race, the Imola overtake round the outside, to Trailer Park Girls go round the outside on OJP. How many other examples do you want? The British Grand Prix pole, yet again. Saudi Arabia, another god tier lap. Again, the other weekend goes close but no cigar, but yet and still another god tier performance. Potentially not necessarily in qualifying, but in the race proper. You saw how George was down the road because he had himself a quicker car, and you saw that Max Verstappen managed to, as near as makes no difference, go 26 laps with a fire-breathing dragon in Lando Norris right on his heels, on his gearbox, but was unaffected. Crackosaurus, how dare we glaze? Do you know what I mean? Surely, if there is truth underlying then glaze is not the right signifier. Surely, what an abomination that led to. In 2020, Luke, I don't think they were too far away because Max was young then. But my point is, extrapolate that out now. Redo this exercise, AWS, and tell me where Max is now. And I say all of that to say this. Bernie Ecclestone has come out, and again, he's partial for a cheeky soundbite. Is Bernie Ecclestone doesn't necessarily shy away from controversy. Indeed, sometimes you listen to some of his critiques of Lewis Hamilton and you would be forgiven for thinking that Bernie Ecclestone is being deliberately controversial. You've heard him in his quotables, his sound bites, but he's always put some respect on Max Verstappen's name. Here's what he said about Oscar Piastri, parlaying into some Max Verstappen glaze. He said that if he were McLaren, that he would lean into Oscar Piastri going forward, that they should build their Drivers' Championship campaign now around him, lest they wish to get their lunch money stolen by a five-time champion in Max Verstappen, who's 63 points adrift. Now, of course, 63 points is material yet and still. 2 race wins and 2 DNFs from Max and Oscar respectively. And Max is still 13 points behind in the championship with 6 races to go. That's chaos. Chat, if we're talking about Max Verstappen winning the championship, then you better believe he will need fortuitous circumstances. But if anybody can, again under the aegis of the god tier performances, him going above and beyond, being the difference on the grid season to date, if anybody can get that done, then surely he has a name, and his name is Maximilian Verstappen. Here's what Bernie said though to the Daily Mail. This is important. He said, if I were a team owner, I think I'd get hold of the Australian kid, because if there is anybody not named Max Verstappen that can win championships, that can be the difference, that's Oscar Piastri. But he continues, bookends his soliloquy thus: Max is the best driver ever. However, no doubts. I used to say it was Alan Prost, but now I've changed my mind. That the greatest ever has a name, and his name is Maximilian Verstappen. Oh, the humanity. What's in the water, chat, of late? Because it feels like every man and their dog is all of a sudden coming round. And I think I know what's happened now. Before, this time last season, it was Damon saying, well, the thing about going into the Mexican Grand Prix and COTA, by the way, the thing about Maximilian Verstappen, he'd say, is that if everybody overtakes like Max, then nobody will ever be able to make and stick a manoeuvre, said Damon Hill. You remember last year when Damon was saying, well, Max employs dastardly tactics. You remember last year when it was Damon saying this about Maximilian Verstappen, that sport doesn't build character, it only reveals it. Oh, the humanity. Now you've heard Damon come away and say, you know, I'm not reneging on anything that I've said. However, Maximilian Verstappen is absolutely the driver of his generation. Well, why weren't you saying that then, Damon Hill? Where did the dastardly tactics go? You've heard Nico Rosberg this season trackside, looking at the way that Max manipulates the car in and on around the limits of adhesion in real time trackside. You've heard James Allen, and we'll defer to James Allen in a minute. You've heard James Allen come out and say that this dude is moving like Michael Schumacher, the Reagan Meister, that he's singing from their hymn sheet now, that he's ripping a page out of their playbook. True GOAT settings. You heard Rob Smedley the other day saying something similar. Again, this is the chap that worked with Michael Schumacher, and so therefore he would know. It feels like en masse all of a sudden Max Verstappen naysayers are being converted from skeptics now into believers, and that's significant. It's chaotic now. Does that mean that Max Verstappen can win the championship? I personally reserve. I'm not so sure. It is going to be chaotic, and per Max, I don't think faith nor hope is something that can help him here. It's going to be fortuitous circumstances. He will need favours, multiple favours from the racing gods. They will need to turn their backs on McLaren. He'll need DNFs. He'll need them to start taking out each other. He'll need for George to take points out of McLaren and Kimi Antonelli and the Ferrari boys if they can get involved too. There's a lot of things that need to happen if Max is going to overhaul that current 63 point Delta, but does that mean that he can't do it? Absolutely not. Do you know what I mean? Thou shalt put some respect on Max Verstappen's name. Lewis won't wait, did he? I don't know. Let's not go in on the Lewis Max topic in the chat. Lewis better than Max behave. Oh my gosh, are we going that? I can't do it, chat. I've already expended too much emotional bandwidth on the bloody F1 community and the extent of its bloody intellectual snobbery. I can't do it. But here's what James Allen has to say. And again, this is emblematic now of the broader F1 community now standing with Max Verstappen and his greatness. Roll the clip.
Total rubbish. So he was quite clear about it. But I think that's a crucial factor. Maybe it comes too late to win the title, but Red Bull finally understanding this car. I think that's the main factor in Max being a real factor again in this title fight, more than upgrades or anything like that.
It's interesting because if you look at the actual numbers, Verstappen has 6 pole positions this year, which is more than Piastri and Norris. Russell has a couple. Wins wise, it's still Piastri 7, Norris 5, Verstappen 4, Russell 2. Coming back to you then, Rob, it's incredible, just by the way, that Max has still never been on pole or won in Singapore. I mean, how is that possible in a career like he's had? Anyway, but his virtuosity in manhandling that car to second place in both qualifying and race, when his teammate was completely lost among the back markers, really shows his skill. Rob, your old boss, Ross Brawn, used to say of Michael Schumacher, he wins the races he should win and also the ones he shouldn't. And that's what makes him a great driver. And I think we're looking at the same thing here with Max, aren't we?
Yeah, we are. Max is undoubtedly a great driver, as the guys have just attested to. And, if we're even talking about Max Verstappen, and there's a mathematical possibility of him winning the 2025 World Championship, I mean, that just speaks volumes about what the guy can do. And that's the difference between the great, right? A difference between a very good driver, and let's just say that all Formula One drivers are very good. They're very good to excellent. And the difference between a very good to excellent driver compared to a great driver is that they will nick opportunities that they really shouldn't have, right? Should Max have been second in the Singapore Grand Prix? Probably not. He could have actually even won it, with a little bit more of a perfect lap on Saturday. Then he probably would have ran away and won it. But again, he demonstrated just how good he was on Sunday. Okay, it's a difficult place to pass. McLaren was seriously quicker than the Red Bull. It was quicker if you look at the data, as we do after each and every Grand Prix. It was pretty much quicker right throughout each part of the race, and he managed to still come home in second position. He's had some great races.
He does it because, not despite, I'm telling you, he hasn't had a car all season. That's Rob Smith. Ignore me and my very unique brand of Max Verstappen glaze. Listen to James Allen. He's been around this sport for a gazillion years. Rob Smedley worked with Michael Schumacher, and they're now putting Max's name in the same sentence as Michael. Comparing and contrasting, that tells you everything you need to know. And as far as next year, Max has said a couple of different things, because that's what we're having the conversation about, really, isn't it? We're forward forecasting. Maybe he gets it done this year, maybe he doesn't. Maybe it's OJP's time at the altar of a double brake ducted MCL39. Maybe it's that time, or maybe it's Lando's time, if he can remember who he is and have his Weetabix, make some lifestyle choices, as Nico Rosberg has so encouraged, implored him to do, and deliver for once upon his not insubstantial potential. Learn some continuous, incremental improvement. Start properly, launch properly, be aggressive off of the pole as he was at the Singapore Grand Prix. Maybe Lando can get it done as well, but again, we tune in. There is uncertainty in there, and if McLaren dilly-dally around too much, then you can rest assured that Max Verstappen will stomp on their rhetorical windpipes without compunction. He will. He has it in him. He's plenty good enough, and now apparently he has himself a car because they're bringing upgrades aren't they, Red Bull? And Max has spoken about 2026 today. This is why it's mad. Max is saying that potentially next year we might have ourselves a Red Bull powertrain that is serious, that is capable and competitive. Now that's in stark contrast to everything that Lauren Mekis said when he arrived, but maybe he's managing expectations. Lauren Mekis said it would be unreasonable with any sort of logic front and centre to assume that Red Bull powertrains would design something in their first year as nerds and virgins that can compete with the might, the behemoth that is Mercedes, the boys and girls from Brackley and Brooks. So too Ferrari. These lot have been building F1 engines as long as the hills are old. So why wouldn't therefore you expect them to build a market leading power unit? Lest we forget, brand new rules and regs in 2026, and the best will have themselves a power unit. Remember, it's new, 50% ICE, 50% electric. Therefore, if you nail yourself a power unit and as a supplement can nail yourself a bit of cheeky aero, get yourself some sustainable Petronas fuel, then you'll have yourself a car capable of winning races and therefore championships. But Max has said that he might be all right next year in the Red Bull. I'm not sure, Christopher, it had to be Enter the Dragon. Pay homage to Cameron Senior, who got me onto Enter the Dragon in the first place. Oh, the humanity indeed, Dr. Dad. So go on, here's what's important about next year. There's a couple moving parts. Remember, Toto would drop kick in the chest. As brilliant as George has been, he would cast him away off to the side with the other F1 flotsam and jetsam is what Toto will do. If that meant that he could increase his chances of so much as getting a whiff of the signature of Maximilian Verstappen. He's told us already. Here's why this is important. Because as far as George hasn't signed a contract yet. And some, I have it on good knowledge, good sources, that say that George is doing this by design. And there's a couple of different reasons why this could be. We're going to drop some knowledge here. In the first instance, if you know anything about George Russell, he will want to get paid. He will want to be remunerated for what he deserves. He won't want to get 1 or 2 or 3 million. He'll be looking at Lando and Oscar, seeing that they're getting 30 million, thinking, right, they're not as good as me as peddlers. They don't do for McLaren what I do for Mercedes. If we switch the cars around, they wouldn't be able to do in that W16 what I'm doing, dragging it and the team kicking and screaming back to the victory mountaintop. They would not be able to do that, is what George is thinking. So it would be unfair, therefore, to give me less as far as my package than they are getting. 30 million, both Piastri and Lando. George will be looking for that in the first instance because he would have had the conversation with his old mate and mentor Lewis Hamilton, and he will know what good looks like, what commensurate looks like as far as negotiating a brand new contract. There's your Exhibit A. In a second term, in a second instance, he will know that Toto's told us as much. He doesn't hesitate. He keeps telling us like it's going out of fashion, wanting Max, that I want to sign Max Verstappen, that it would be fiduciary malfeasance of me as a CEO, team principal and a 33% shareholder of Mercedes not to go out and do my damnedest to get Max Verstappen, who, by all accounts, all the F1 aficionados are now concurring is the best driver on the grid. Toto's like, I'm not doing my job if I don't try and sign Max. Can you imagine being George Russell hearing that? Now what happens next, chat? Do you think George Russell... Okay, so here's what happened next. Do you think George won't want to enhance his position at Mercedes if he stays there by severing ties with Toto, who is now his manager and team principal? George cannot have his manager being team principal, but that's a conflict of interest if ever you've heard one. Now, I know it happens in Formula One a lot. It happened with Alonso and Fabio Briatore. I get it. But when you reach these junctures when you get to these tipping points as far as a contractor negotiation, you need to have yourself a manager who is a separate entity from your team principal, CEO, a Mercedes 33% shareholder. You need somebody who's going to fight, scratch and claw for every penny, every advantage in that contractual negotiation. Toto's not going to do that. He can't, because as far as his priority order, he's the shareholder, and then he's the CEO, and then he's the team principal, and then all of the aforementioned overtype him being manager of George Russell. So I have it on good account that the following are the sticking points of the George Russell contract. That's why we haven't heard him extended. Toto can say all he wants about, it's finer details, it's minutiae, then it's just sponsorship time and bandwidth. It's nothing to do with the length of the contract. I do not believe you, Toto. At this point, I feel like you're just talking, that these are just words for words' sake. Toto, the boy who cried wolf. Here's what I think might be going on. There's a couple of different things, and this is important. In the first instance, this is a moving target, because all of a sudden driver silly season has been resurrected at the altar of Oscar Piastri, whose team are now using his opportunities as leverage. Don't think for a second Mark Webber won't be saying this to Zak Brown. Well, listen, if you don't do right by my Oscar, we're going to send him across to Ferrari, or we might send him across to Mercedes or a Red Bull. Here's the chatter. You can see people are talking about it already. This is a real thing, because Oscar Piastri holds bargaining power after Max per Bernie Ecclestone. Which one of those drivers are you going to pick if you need to win yourself a world championship, if you need to build a team around a driver? Of course, it's got to be Oscar Piastri in the shout. Of course. Charles Leclerc, of course. George Russell, but it's one of those three. Lando Norris, you could talk about him as well. But who are you going to build a team around? Potentially Oscar, and that's where their bargaining power comes from. Now, I have it on good notice, good source, telling me that Oscar Piastri might not necessarily be considering Scuderia Ferrari, that chatter is just a misnomer, a smoke screen, misdirection, David Copperfield settings. But if Oscar Piastri were to talk about Mercedes potentially in 2026 and 2027, then that would be a different thing altogether. But 3 doth not go into 2. So which one of those drivers would Toto get rid of? Well, surely, because neither one of Kimi or George have a contract. Would George potentially want to go over to McLaren, a God-tier team with a God-tier car, whose learnings are potentially going to be rolled forward into 2026 with the God-tier Mercedes engine, by the way? I don't think that's the most unlikely probability. Now, listen, I think George, if I know anything about George, he's going to want to stay at Mercedes. Give that dude the multi-year contract that he so deserves. Cast aside Max Verstappen for a second, as many people are now saying that why do you need Max even if you've got George in the car? Give George, therefore, what he needs. Surely. This is nonsense. If they give him what he wants, what he asks for, if they minimise the amount of sponsorship duties that he's going to have to do over the next couple of years and allow him to focus on getting what he wants, what he's dreamed of, what he would do anything for, that of course is a championship of the driver's variety, then the contract will be easy. But we've got to ask the question, since they keep longing it out, delay after delay after delay. Russell, red flag, red flag, red flag. Ferrari are checking. Umonch now. George going to get drop kicked in the chest by Toto. You can feel it coming, Umonch. Again, I have it on good authority. This is all conjecture and speculation, so don't take this stuff to the bank. But I have it on good authority. Again, I've speculated that what George will want to do is get himself out of that managerial contract with Toto, so he's got more negotiating power. But I have it on good authority that that's why this is taking so long. Because George Russell can't get him. If he's going to sign a new contract, then that will be on the proviso that Toto, the boy who cried wolf, is still his manager. I have it on good authority. But let's keep that between us, between these 4 virtual walls. So John Perry, you're a legend as always, sir, and I'm grateful and thankful for your being here as a member of the community. You're far too kind. So imagine then, to put a full stop in this. Imagine if George desperately wanted to change his management, but a provisor was signing with Mercedes, who everybody's saying they're going to have the best car in 2026 and potentially 27 and 28 shortly thereafter. Imagine if as part of that contract, Toto would need to remain as his manager, and that's why we're seeing the delays, because George wants to distance himself now because he understands and sees the impacts, the downside ramifications of having a manager who's also your team principal and shareholder, owner and CEO. It makes no sense. But George, in order to do that, might have to wait till next season. And then by next season, imagine Lando's won at the altar of favouritism and Oscar Piastri wants to find himself. It suits, doesn't it? Maybe this is conjecture, maybe a bit of a nothing burger. Maybe I'm doing apophenia of the F1 variety, connecting causation dots that should not be connected. But I think this could be a thing. Oscar Piastri to Mercedes. George Russell. George Russell going the other way. Oh, the humanity. Especially as George and Lando are good mates, right? You heard them interacting. When asked to George, when pitched at George Russell what percentage chance he gives Max Verstappen of winning a championship, he looked Lando Norris very banterfully in his eyes and said 100%. But they are mates, aren't they? Imagine George in the radio complaining about getting barged into by Lando. I mean, he wouldn't. He'd be much more vocal and less stoic than Oscar Piastri. So they need to manage it. Make sure you thank Sir John Perry. I know Sir John Perry, different legend, a different type of gravy and legend each and every single time. I appreciate it. Toto is a gobber. A goober. What do you mean, Sir John? If he lets if he lets George go. I think it would be a mistake. As brilliant as Oscar is, I think it would be a bad. But stranger things have happened, Sir John, is the issue. Like, with nobody expected Lewis to up sticks, leave McLaren and go to Mercedes. I just don't know. Per Murray Walker writes, Sir John, anything can and usually does happen in the weird and wacky world that is F1. Imagine George in the radio. I don't know why George isn't on more now. Makes sense. I think you always take a low ball number, right, to get into, to make sure you get into and keep your seat in F1. But now he's a different peddler. I mean, to pick a driver on the grid that could take it to Max potentially. If you don't think of George, then I don't know. I prefer OJP over Lando. Russell has been forged in Mercedes. Lewis felt very well said. So John, oh, the humanity indeed. More than 400. Yeah, do me a favour and smash the like. If you like the stream, of course, then you must like the stream. Tacky. Tacky. So OJP over Lando all day. What's Christopher saying here? Surf Source. It's chaotic and it's going to be a big week, chat. Got to stay tuned. Bear with me. I'm telling you, some news is going to break. Potentially the contract news for George over the next couple of weeks. And what else have we got to look forward to? COTA will be this weekend and it will be chaos. Of course, the championship is still at stake. And Maximilian Verstappen doesn't tend to do too badly around the COTA Grand Prix. If I recall correctly, we'll get the stats up and we'll preview it in real time. Of course, why would we not? Got to look forward to the announcement at F1 TV that Apple TV, will potentially get the exclusive rights to broadcasting all Formula One activities in US markets. That potentially will be announced over the course of the COTA Grand Prix weekend. The only sticking point between now and then, the minutiae and T's and C's on which they are stuck, is of course relating to the landlocking of F1 TV. We don't get it in the UK F1 TV. We've got to do all this weird circumlocating and going around, all this VPN stuff, because you can't, if you're located in the UK and you want to watch F1, all roads go through Sky Sports F1 and then £90 subscription if you want to watch F1 in HD. And that's techie, isn't it? It's a bit techie, that. It feels unfair somehow. When we're paying £90 a month, £1,000 a year as near as makes no difference. And F1 TV is 150. That doesn't feel fair. But that's what Apple TV want to impose on the US F1 fan. That's why it gets techie, because United States F1 fans are going to feel the pinch that UK fans have been feeling. F1 won't want to do that because they're trying to build their own proposition, understanding the power of new media, plus broadening even their sports portfolio into 202. It's going to get techie, I'm telling you. I'll be keen to see when that announcement comes out, what happens with F1 TV, whether it stays as it is or whether United States fans, North American fans can no longer indulge in a cheeky £100 and get themselves all they can eat F1 viewage and footage at the altar of F1 TV. Yeah, George got schooled on negotiations. Has he though, Michael? I think once that number comes out, it will be a multi-year for sure. But I reckon he'll get his bag. He will get his bag. 30 million at least. You could argue that he should be 35, 40. Yeah, he should be up there. Imagine George on the radio. Yeah, it gets techie. Apple TV would be a good pick for the US. Only if you can still do F1 TV. That's bonkers. £1,000 a year for residents of a country that found that it feels disrespectful, doesn't it, Sir John? It feels almost ironic. Broadcast the chaos. Cash rules everything around me. Queen. Kinnell says, I only pay 120 for F1 here in the United States. I will be at COTA. I'm very jealous. F1 is better. You guys have been legends. I will love you and leave you between now and the next time. Same time tomorrow where it'll get techie. There will be a newsletter from the legend that they call Joe Saywood early in the morning. And in there, it will have some things, F1 news and update-centric threads at which we will need to pull between now and next time. Grateful to each and every single one of you. And I make no apology for saying that, nor labouring that point. Between now and next time, prosecution rests. No further questions, Your Honour.